Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. And Stacy and I are really happy to be here again, getting another chance to deliver the same webinar. And good news for you, Stacy has new news, so there will be new content. And as always, it's action and content packed when the two of us get together. So today we're going to be talking about new EPDs and PCRs for the digital economy. And we're all working to make EPDs better, to make procurement decisions, to make actually lower impact, higher performing buildings. So what we're going to cover today is just a quick introduction to Sustainable Minds. For those of you who are meeting us for the first time, I'm Terry Swack, the founder and CEO. I'll just touch on how we came together in this partnership, and we'll toss it right over to Stacy, and she'll talk about the EC3 tool, how to use it, what's new, some new things they released this week. We'll talk about Open EPD, their initiative to digitize EPDs to make that content available for all kinds of platform and tool providers. And then I'm going to talk about the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment PCR Development Guidance Document that's in the works, and that I'm co-chairing that process, so you're getting it from the horse's mouth. And we'll talk about where Open EPD fits in. And then we'll take a look at the transparency catalog and how we take the data from the EC3 tool to make it easy to identify lower embodied carbon products, and then take you right into the EC3 tool to use. We'll talk a little bit about our transparency reports. It's our brand of environmental product declaration, always delivered in the cloud and also now in the EC3 tool. And we'll take a quick look at the North American PCR catalog for building and construction if we have time. And then we'll see if there's a Q&A. Any questions you have that don't get answered, we will absolutely follow up and answer. So go ahead and put things in the chat. Sorry, in the questions panel. This webinar is being recorded. You will be able to request the deck if you would like that too, but you will automatically get sent a link to the recording in a follow-up email. So kicking things off, Sustainable Minds is a provider of environmental product transparency applications and services. I started the company in 2007. Our first product is a streamlined eco-concept and LCA software tool for product manufacturers to be able to evaluate the life cycle impacts of products in early stage design so they can make better decisions about the products that they make. And then in 2012 or so, when LEED version 4 was introduced and product transparency was a pillar concept of LEED version 4, we took what we had been doing to simplify the understanding and use of life cycle assessment results and turned our attention to how to use that knowledge to help manufacturers market better using life cycle assessment results. And that is what environmental product declarations are. So that was what led us into this space. We are the only end-to-end product transparency solutions provider in the market today. We are a program operator. We develop PCRs and EPDs. We are the only program operator that is actually a publisher. We have our own publishing platform, again, in the cloud. That's what our transparency reports are. I've always had our eye on digital, so the ongoing relationship with the EC3 tool is, very simpatico. We deliver LCA and material evaluation services because we need to have that technical knowledge to be able to both be a program operator and to finally deliver the technology tools that get the information that manufacturers are creating out into the marketplace for architects, engineers, contractors, and owners to be able to find those brands, find the products, find the transparency documentation, and make better informed decisions about projects. So building transparency and the EC3 tool, partnership with Sustainable Minds and the transparency catalog collectively, we are committed to simplifying product transparency reporting and making environmental product declaration data more understandable and meaningful. And to do that, deliver easy use and powerful tools. So today, what you've come to hear about is how there's momentum in the marketplace to make better PCRs and better EPDs that can reliably be used to procure lower impact, higher performing products. There's a big demand, particularly now that people are aware of the embodied carbon impacts and what the longer term implications are. Government, state and federal government is now involved in creating legislation to incentivize people doing procurement to procure lower embodied carbon products. So all of that that's happening is really the driver for having to make better, smarter, more reliable tools. And as you'll see, to get to better EPDs, we need better PCRs. So all of that is in the works. So Stacy, I'm going to throw it over to you, and you can tell us what you've been doing and what's new.
Great, thanks. I think somehow I need to share my screen.
Yep.
All right, can you see my screen, Terry?
Yep.
All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to listen to some more kind of EC3 current status and what's coming, and really hopefully give you some good points in terms of how the tool can currently be used for procurement and the results that we're seeing in terms of EPD transparency and utilization. So my name is Stacy Smedley. I'm currently the Executive Director of Building Transparency, a nonprofit that is supporting embodied carbon reduction through digital data transparency and our kind of fledgling product, the free open access EC3 tool. Just a little bit about the nonprofit to start. It was launched in January of 2020, once the EC3 tool was launched publicly as an incubation project of the Carbon Leadership Forum with over 50 industry partners. And the nonprofit's mission is to provide the open access data and tools necessary really to enable broad and swift action when it comes to addressing embodied carbon, because we have a short time frame in order to make big impact. Our board of directors includes a lot of the large sustainability tech companies with sustainability professionals engaged in looking at their buildings and the carbon footprints, as well as some embodied carbon leaders that helped conceive of the tool and incubate it. Our current partners at the nonprofit are really cross-sectional in terms of the sector of the building industry. We have grant funding through Breakthrough Energy to help support the nonprofit administration and our programs. We have owners like Microsoft and Amazon and Google that are supporting the nonprofit and really engaging in piloting the EC3 tool and ensuring it's working for them. We have partners like Autodesk that are helping us with integrations with their softwares. We have contractors, architects, engineers that are all piloting and supporting the tool so it can be free for everyone, but also that they can get kind of one-on-one time with our team to ensure that they can use the tool to the best of its ability and inform current improvements, as well as material manufacturers and industry organizations. And these folks come to us really wanting to help engage on their material category to ensure that we are getting proper filtering, as well as looking at the data to get appropriate uncertainty analysis attached to those categories. So we're really proud of our kind of cross-sectional support and the partnerships that we have in all these different components of the building industry. I'm going to spend 2 seconds on these because I think everyone that's probably on this webinar already knows this. So we are talking about embodied carbon. And we are doing so because when we look at manufacturing emissions globally, major materials that are being made for buildings and infrastructure are major emitters when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, we know we're building a lot over the next 30 years, and that I would say more than half of those emissions we now know are in the embodied carbon side of a building or an infrastructure project. We are really at a tipping point, like Terry said. We're working as fast as we can to provide the things that we need to, and largely this is because we have policy now being established by both private and public owners of buildings and infrastructure projects that are including their supply chain, including embodied carbon of their buildings and their zero carbon targets, and then also making policy that requires this type of transparency of building materials. So large owners like Amazon and Microsoft, all the way to policy at the various levels. Terry mentioned this is a great resource on the Carbon Leadership Forum website where you can see just the sheer number of policies that are coming around embodied carbon at the various scales. So there's city and county policies, there's state procurement policies going through kind of a buy clean lens. There are incentive policies, things like what's going on in New York from a low carbon concrete perspective, as well as federal policies that are looking at things through the lens of both of those, so buy clean and incentive programs. So just a lot going on and a lot of work to do to support all of these things as they develop. Just an example of each of those at the county scale, there's things like climate action plans that are starting to require EPDs by a certain date and then use EC3 to help source the data necessary and report. There's, again, all the way to federal policy that's looking at buy clean language around different material categories that must require EPDs and disclose, and then limits or thresholds that would be set in terms of the maximum carbon intensity over time. So really the question today is what are we doing about it at Building Transparency, and what's EC3 doing to really support all of this as it develops and provide that data that we need. So just kind of going through where EC3 currently is, it is a tool that was focused keenly on environmental product declarations to start, focused on the A1 to A3 product emission stage based on that being the major impact source for most building materials. Knowing that everything else is still important, but starting there because that's where we could get the data and really act on it during procurement. It is a free tool, it's open and transparent. Our entire database that I will show you is available through an API. All the public categories can be called and pulled into other tools, which we are now seeing happen, which is exciting. And it's industry-led and supply chain focused, as I mentioned. It started as a tool to fill a gap. So the title of this webinar, I think, hits it on the head. It's about procurement, how we actually look at products that meet our requirements, specify the lowest carbon options, procure the lowest carbon options, incentivize competition on carbon, just like on cost. And that's the gap that EC3 is really keenly focused on filling to start. And then again, the tool is doing two things. It's relying on this database that I'll show you of digital environmental product declarations that we pulled in largely through scripts, reading PDF documents. And then allows you to find and compare materials on top of those, that database to do comparisons of products that meet similar performance requirements and are following the same rules, like the same PCR, and then do the math against your project quantities. So build that into an actual upfront carbon estimate and a realized embodied carbon report once you've procured the materials and attached those quantities to the EPDs. And of course, EPDs are these documents that have largely been published as PDFs to date and have lived in various databases, either by the program operators that publish them or the manufacturers that have disclosed and invested in them. And they have these tables in them that give us that kilogram of CO2 per unit that we really need to do this comparison, starting with carbon. Just a little bit of information of where we are today. So EC3 currently has over 16,000 registered users since launch in November 2019. We are approaching 17,000 now, which is exciting. In the past month, users have logged in from over 71 countries. So we've gone from a very kind of North American focus at launch now to a global tool, trying to bring in global data. And again, our cross-section of users really maps to our cross-section of partners. And that's because embodied carbon is something that has to be addressed by everyone, whether you're the architect specifying, the owner creating the requirements, the engineer, making the concrete mixes, performance requirements, the contractors procuring the materials, the manufacturers disclosing. There's a role for everyone to really play. Just more statistics, we have over 2,200 building projects in the tool to date with integrations with, again, Autodesk is one of our partners helping us to support those integrations, but also we have acquired Tally from Karen Timberlake and have an export from that whole building lifecycle assessment tool that allows people to build projects using quantities. Just another thing, just in terms of the sheer number of EPDs that we now have, with concretes, we were able to engage in a digital transfer of ready-mix on-demand EPDs from Climate Earth to start here in the US, which you can see the uptick in the EPDs that we were able to digitize, how fast that happened once we had that integration. So we currently have over 40,000 mix-specific concrete EPDs in the tool. Again, very focused here in the US because that's where we have that integration and that kind of on-demand generation. hoping to spread that other places, and seeing this pop up in major markets across the US. When it comes to other categories, we are also seeing just a steady growth. So this is looking at us going global, trying to bring in EPDs and digitize them from all over the world, and really include more categories as people ask us for them. So the thing that I'll show you when we get into the tool today is that we have officially now this year already released data cabling, resilient flooring, and membrane roofing went live today, and cement and CMU will come before the end of the year into the public version. When we have this data, when it comes to procurement, what we've seen happen now that we can track this over time in EC3 is that in a market like Washington that had our 3 large concrete suppliers engage in 2019 in EPD production and disclosure into EC3, this is also where we have 2 major owners requiring this information at time of bid and competing on carbon and cost in that market. We've seen the actual average emissions of all the EPDs in EC3 for those suppliers drop by more than 20%. So when we have the data and we're using it during procurement, and it's standardized and it's digitized, that's really the impact that we know is possible. And we've seen reductions of more than 30% proven across kind of whole buildings that are doing this in multiple material categories. The next thing that we have now done is just really think about what we need to do to make this even more actionable and more accessible, and really blanket really the whole globe with these digital EPD documents. And so one thing that we engaged in 2020 was an open EPD program. This is a standard format for digital EPDs. I will walk through this in the tool, but really what it's doing is lessons learned from all of those EPDs that we started as PDFs and wrote scripts to digitize, understanding the fields that were common to them, the fields that were needed, what was missing in terms of standardization, and how we could build that into the format that all of those scripts populate for existing EPDs, but also create this as a standard that anyone can use to create an EPD in the future. Other things that we're looking at now based on what our users are asking for and where we see things going from a policy perspective globally is the ability to actually mock up and really start to insert other impact stages into EC3. Again, this is just a mock-up. We're in early days as we try to think about how the tool can start to support more things, provide more data that's open access and transparent. And this relies on projects that we're doing around open impact data sets, starting with the major structural materials to get to these really good, robust models that tell us where the impacts are across the stages for things like, here's an example of ready-mix concrete and CMU. So all of that is in progress and are things that we are working on. When it comes to resources, we have an embodied carbon action plan that over 25 owners helped us write that has links in it to specification and procurement language that can be used, as well as contract language and basis of design language during the whole process to really standardize the asks that we're starting to have of both our design and construction teams, but also of the manufacturers in terms of what they must disclose. You can find that on our website. The last thing is we are building the resources out in terms of other things to help people use the tool and understand it from various perspectives. We just did a presentation particular to program operators with analysts leading that on our team, and that will be uploaded soon. But there are videos, and there again are all these templates and things that can be downloaded to help really start to make the requirements and the asks and do that in an aligned way. With that, I'm going to go into the tool and do a little bit of an under the hood of EC3. I'm going to do this through the lens of a couple of different user types. So again, anyone can go to the home page and actually register for free for the tool, and click that button to really put in the information and get a login. Once you've done that, you can just sign in. So I'm going to go into my ordinary Stacy account, which is my professional user account, which is what any of you could have if you are a public user. And just show you a couple of things that I've released actually this week. So the first is that in the public version, we do now have this PVC and KEE membrane roofing category. It's been informed with the CFFA and their members to make sure we've got all the components there for filters. The same is true for resilient flooring now, which is live in the tool, where we have all of the performance filters for resilient flooring down to the materials and things like form factor. And if you search one of these, I could just search the whole category first so you can see that we do have over 200 EPDs for resilient flooring currently in the tool as an example. So those are now live in the public version, which is very exciting. If I go to the pilot version where all of the kind of tools that are in pilot live, that pilot users can see, if I open this up, you're going to see just a whole other kind of list of all these pilot categories that we are working through. The next ones that are on our queue are actually the cement category, which will come soon. If I do this, you're going to see that if I click the search button for cement, we've got quite a good collection of product-specific cement EPDs that will be coming to the public version shortly, thanks to the support of Lahai Hansen, and then CMU will follow shortly thereafter. So that's really what's been published this week for the public users from categories with filters. The other thing we have pushed to the public category, which is a pretty big deal on our side, is the fact that you can now click on Manage Data and Product EPDs and really query and see the whole database of EPDs. This doesn't allow direct comparisons and filtering because we need to really curate those categories and do that right with our partners before we allow that kind of comparability and filtering. But if you come to this section of the tool, it'll tell you that we have over 59,000 EPDs in the tool. And you can then do all sorts of different things, like actually search and filter for something like Europe, where it's going to then filter this list back down to how many European EPDs we have. We have almost 19 or 2,000. You can filter by if they've been parsed, where they've either have errors or are okay. So I could just say, let's look at all the ones that are not failed that we need to go do something to help with the data side. You can filter by program operator. I see EPD Norway right there, so I'll use them as my guinea pig. And just start to curate this list and see how many EPDs we have. From here, you can then actually go into the EPD. So if I open up just this first one at random, here's that digital EPD in open EPD format with all the fields that we were able to parse into the format from the PDF. You can go down and see that this includes things that are not what we use in our UI, but all the different impact stages and impact categories, links to the PCRs that we've digitized, the plan information, all of that is part of this open EPD format, and every EPD in EC3 will have this information in this format. But you are now, as a public user, able to do this for the entire database of EPDs within EC3. Just talking a little bit more about open EPD, if I go into the homepage and you're really interested in that format or standard, you can click on this and just learn more about it. There's a link to a document at the bottom that's going to give you information on the format, and also links to the spreadsheet. That's just really again, everything that we do is open access and kind of collectively built. So this is a spreadsheet that goes through all the different schemas for this format. We also have the documentation if you're wanting to look at it, and Swagger if you're an API person for this format as well. So you can begin to build this into how you create EPDs. There's also the feature just within EC3 if you are a program operator, where you can go to Manage Data. I'll do this from my ordinary Stacy account, but if I go to Manage Data and I go to my EPDs, it's going to tell me what EPDs are assigned to me as a program operator, and if I've created them as drafts, if they've been reviewed, if they've been third-party checked. If you go to Product Data, there's a button that allows you just to simply, for free, start with our open EPD format and create an EPD. And I would need to have rights to do that. So if I go to my admin account, if you're a program operator, you automatically get the rights in the tool to actually create EPDs using this format. You can click this button, pick the category of EPD that you're creating. I'm just going to pick something at random again, and then get to that draft format that you can then fill in, add images, and do all of the work to create that digital instance. And then again, leave it in draft until all the appropriate checks have been made, all of the blocks have been verified in terms of the information in it, and then publish it to EC3 while you're creating that PDF document at the time of kind of EPD generation. So all of that is possible in the tool. All of those are things that we are continuing to develop and work through. If I go back to my presentation, just getting down to kind of what we see happening today with this data is, these easy steps that are all part of that carbon action plan. If a manufacturer or product doesn't have an EPD, teams are asking for them. If they do have them, they're being used in the tools being used in specifications to start to compare products and pick the lower carbon option as the basis of design. This information is getting it into bid documents where requirements are made for EPDs, and then the carbon data is actually used as a time of bid leveling in sheets like this, where you can actually start to compare the carbon emissions and get to the lowest carbon bidder and compare that to the lowest cost. This tool then allows you to select these things in the project side, which I didn't want to get into today, but it's a whole other presentation. Enables you to start to see the realized reductions based on the EPDs you've chosen. And that's the data that can be used to say that you actually, emitted this much carbon to build this building or this project. Again, 4 easy steps: require EPDs, utilize the database, set targets or limits, and require project teams to submit the data to get that realized carbon accounting. And you've already seen those slides. So I think, Terry, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you and just put this up here to say that if anyone has questions or wants to engage with us at Building Transparency, please feel free to reach out to me.
You know what, Stacy? I'm going to throw a couple questions at you while you're still there.
Sure.
That I think probably audience participants are considering themselves. I don't believe there's any program operators on this call, but there are manufacturers. So I thought it would be helpful to go back into the tool and just recap what are manufacturers able to do to manage their data in the EC3 tool.
Sure, and I will do it through the lens of my organization account, so I'm not opening up a manufacturer's account. But every user has a few things going on. They have their own user profile, which they can do things like default EPD types they want in their searches, measurement units, metric or US, etc., and really set up your own profile. If you have put in a profession and your employer, you then link to that organization. So if you are a manufacturer that registers for the tool and you put your profession as manufacturing, and you put in the title, the name of your organization, you will be linked to your organization. And I would say that any organization with EPDs currently in EC3, that organization page has been made for you as a starting point that you can then edit once you register and assign yourself to that organization. If I click on organization, this is the organization page. So every manufacturer can basically manage this themselves. And what that's going to do is enable you to do things like, alternative names. Are there parent organizations if you've got, different types of product lines or different organizations manufacturing different things that are all under a parent? You can upload other documents about your organization, other kind of disclosures that you'd want someone to be able to find if they visited your page. And then you're going to see your employees in terms of anyone from your organization that has access to the tool. Then, of course, I'm not a manufacturer, so this is not populated for me. But if I was and I had EPDs in the tool, or I was trying to get my EPDs in the tool, you would be able to basically manage and curate the plants to make sure that they have the right name, that they have the categories that they produce, they have the address, and then make sure those are tagged in your EPDs. So there's a level of edit access for manufacturers when it comes to your own data. When it comes to plant locations, it would give you the list of EPDs here that were tagged to your organization that you could then go into, just like I was showing you, and you would have access to edit certain things. So I'll just go back to this product EPD tab and open an EPD at random. I'll just pick on Cadman. So if Cadman was logged into this, Cadman would be able to upload an image they'd want to appear here. They would be able to add more product specifications about that particular mix if they'd like. They'd be able to add up different documents if they wanted to include other attachments. If it drops down, it would be things like MSDS sheets or other declarations with a link or a URL or a download button. And it would be being able to check or manage that plant that's assigned to your EPD. So all of those are things that we try to give people edit access to the things that they should be able to manage and edit. A program operator, of course, would be the only one that could start to edit things like the actual impact results in the EPD format, or things like who verified the document. So edit rights are tied to the type of user you are and the organization that you're tied to.
That is a great clarification. So, and really just to make a soundbite, because I get asked this quite frequently. Manufacturers will go and look at their EPDs in the EC3 tool and they'll say, well, I don't really understand the results. Can I change them? So the answer is no, you can't change them, but because that's actually what gets verified. This is third-party verified when your EPD gets created. But what Stacy and the team have created in the EC3 tool is for you to be able to augment your EPD results with additional information about the product that people would want to know, in specification or comparison. But now, Stacy, let's say a manufacturer says, geez, I really thought my product was pretty low embodied carbon product, and I don't really understand what the results are telling me, and why is mine coming out higher when it's compared. And so maybe what you can do is talk a little bit about the estimated uncertainty and the boxes below that, what those check boxes mean.
Sure, yeah, and this is something that, again, part of this releasing of categories to public is completing this uncertainty analysis with the manufacturers and the industry orgs actually providing the LCA data for us to understand the relative impacts of all these things for their product category. So this is keenly important when you're looking at this to understand it. But what this is telling you is the GWP per declared unit that is disclosed in the EPD, and then what that estimated uncertainty is around that disclosed number. And the parameters in terms of how we get there is if it's manufacturer specific versus industry average, there's more specificity in the data if it's one manufacturer. If it's plant specific, so it's one plant in terms of versus maybe an average of 6 plants making a product, so that's more specific. If it's product specific, so it's for one particular product, in this case one particular mix of concrete. And then in this case for this Cadman EPD, which I just happened to open, we also know that it's cement plant specific. So the input of the cement plant data is from an EPD that's also verified. So we can confirm that it's got that much specificity in terms of that number used for the cement input. So this EPD actually has very, very little uncertainty attached to it based on the fact that we know all of these things to be true. We've got methodology reports that we have published and that we're updating that are going to be built into the EC3 tool on that left-hand panel, where you'd be able to just download the methodology for each material category to get to the percentages.
So in summary, the EC3 tool, when an EPD gets added, it looks at the data and runs it through the analysis, the methodology, the protocols that you have in place to analyze how certain is the data, how specific is it, how documented is it, and when those things are not specific, the uncertainty value goes up, and the manufacturer's reported value essentially gets a penalty added to it, and it gets compared at the highest level of uncertainty to the industry range. So you may have manufacture an actually low embodied carbon product, but your EPD may be shooting you in the foot. So Stacy, what can a manufacturer do to make sure that there's little to no uncertainty in the data that they're reporting in their EPD, so they don't get that uncertainty penalty attached to
Yeah,
it?
and I think this is very category specific, because we know that we are working on some categories now where product specificity maybe isn't very much of a, it's okay if it's a range of products that are similar. So I don't want to give like the golden ticket, one answer for all, but it's really understanding the impacts of your product when you're generating that life cycle assessment to create the EPD. Understanding the inputs, understanding, gosh, if I'm making, I'll pick on carpet because I know carpet a little bit. If I'm making a carpet tile, I want to understand where I'm sourcing that backing and that plasticizer and that yarn, and understand the impacts and how much goes to which. I actually want to use that specific data in my EPD. So understanding your own product is part of it, so that you're getting the lowest results you can in sourcing low carbon inputs or ingredients. But then it's really creating an EPD for each distinct thing. So if you think about if someone's trying to use this during procurement and they are specifying rebar, they're trying to procure rebar, and they look at an EPD that's an average of 6 plants from one supplier, that's not going to tell them which plant they should procure from to get the lower carbon option. So for things like rebar, it gets down to product and kind of plant specific data. For concrete, it's mix specific data with cement specific data, because that's the largest impact. I think just understanding your products and then figuring out what that right level of specificity is. We are complementing that by doing our uncertainty analysis and publishing where those uncertainties are as we work through these categories. I don't know if that answered the question fully, Terry, but it really is. There's not like a one path fits all answer.
Yeah,
each product category is different.
right. And where where you wrapped up is every time you publish a category, you publish the methodology for that category.
Correct.
And so would it be advisable for a manufacturer who, is very interested in how they're going to show up in the EC3 tool, is it advisable for the manufacturer and their LCA provider to review that category document before completing their LCA?
I mean, I think so. Absolutely. It's there to be helpful. And we've done the work and the modeling and the math to really document, for the categories that we've now published where those uncertainties are, right? And point even in graphs in those ranges at the product level,
Right.
with the ingredients that go into products. So
Right.
please use the work we're doing if it's helpful. That's really what it's there for. And we've heard from some of the industries we've worked with that they know the next time they go back to republish their EPD that they're going to go actually up the supply chain because they realize that this particular component of their product really matters.
Mm-hmm. So that's the answer, is you've got these really great methodology documents per category that give the manufacturer guidance about really what they should be digging into to get to the bottom of what's causing the embodied carbon impacts of their products.
Yeah, and I will say they are works in progress, right? So it's we've got the categories that are new that we published, and then we're getting better data for the categories we published in the first place. So deeper engagement with different industry organizations, updated data that gives us better modeling starting points, things like that. So I think we all have to realize too, we're kind of on this journey together as we continue to kind of peel back the layers, and we're trying to be as transparent as we can about what we're doing and how. And making it helpful.
And if a manufacturer would like to participate in creating the guidance for a particular category, how would they get in touch with you?
I would just start by emailing me or contacting us through the website in the contact us form. We actually get a lot of entries there now. And we are talking to another kind of swath of industry organizations and manufacturers for 2022 about what we should tackle next and who's really interested or eager to kind of get this data out there and help their material category and the manufacturers that are building products, making products to figure out the best way to do that. So yeah, please just reach out to me. We are here to support, and we always kind of follow the leaders that come to us and want to really help us and partner on that work.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have that I think other people might have. There are some that have come in again, and I will explain the box chart when I get to my section so we can keep moving forward. And oh, here's a good question, Stacy. Can a manufacturer delete a mix design if they stop producing that particular mix?
It can be deleted from the public version, and that's just something that you can do once you're in the tool with manufacturer access. It's just we tell you that the little hashtag to put ahead of the description for it to kind of go away from the public version. It won't go out of the database ever because we never delete any instance of something. It can be superseded or removed from what people are seeing when they're sorting, though.
Would it
But
get
if you
removed?
need any support, let me know.
Would it get removed from the industry range?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to.
Right.
It would not, if you were doing the filter, if it was not a valid EPD or not a current EPD, it would not be in the range.
Right. But if they unpublished it because they don't make it anymore, it has the same effect.
Correct.
Okay, well, keeping going, EC3 stands for Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator. And let's see, this last one, when you compare EPDs for a product, are they all using the same PCR? What are the efforts out there to make EPDs more accurate for global warming potential?
Yeah, so I can answer the PCR question. If I just go into a category to search, you have the ability to filter by PCR if you are wanting to get to that that level of comparability, because we do digitize all the PCRs into a digital object and we link them to each EPD. That is a filter that can be applied.
All right. Good session, Stacy. I always learn something every time we do these, and plus you're always doing new stuff. So thank you for sharing that with us. This is great.
Of course, yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to take the screen back and keep things moving forward. All right, well, let's talk about PCRs. That was a good segue. And as I mentioned before, the greatest contributor to why today we have a lot of non-standardization in EPDs, or easier to say why they're mostly all different, is because mostly PCRs are different. And so if we go to the root cause, to get standardized and reliable EPDs, we need to improve the way PCRs get created. So I am a member of the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment, Center for Life Cycle Assessment, PCR committee. And a couple of years ago, we started a project to look into why EPDs weren't comparable. Why do they all look different? Why do they all have different stuff in them? And what's the heritage of that? And how could we get some learnings moving forward? But in the meantime, there was new work being done on PCRs in other places. And back in 2013, the ACLCA published the first PCR guidance document for the process for program operators, how to go about conducting the PCR development process. And that guidance document was used by all program operators, certainly in North America and even more broadly, to bring their program into conformance with this guidance document. But it was published in 2013, and a lot has happened since then. A lot of EPDs have been created, as Stacy has pointed out. Program operators have learned a lot about the process. And finally, and even more to the point, is that the results of EPDs need to be digitized. They need to be actually created digitally in the first place, and not created and encoded in a PDF and then having to hoover it out of the PDF later to digitize it and hope that extraction process went well. Stacy can tell you the long months and weeks and nights of trying to correct machine-read data from EPDs because PDFs were created to encode data and keep it secure. So now we need the opposite of that. We need good data, but we need it to be usable. And so within the PCR committee, we organized a new committee, and it seemed obvious to roll the EPD comparability project into the new PCR guidance update project. But another thing that really spurred us on was the fact that there is more government interest in procuring products using EPDs. And folks, particularly in the federal government, figured out that to get the data that they wanted to get to be able to make those reliable procurement decisions, those EPDs needed to be created from PCRs that called for creating the results in specific ways. And so there was already work going on related to federal agencies to create a new guidance document for use within the federal government. But now that we have legislation like the Clean Futures Act coming out and a federal Buy Clean program, in the Clean Futures Act, it actually says that folks in the government, if they don't like a particular PCR that is creating the EPDs that they need, if they don't like it, that could trigger the creation of a new PCR. And so for those of you who have worked with program operators and know a little bit about this space, the ISO guidelines particularly say, you don't create a new PCR when there's a PCR existing for a particular category or group. But that kind of decision actually we determined, could be a real reason to trigger the creation of a new PCR. So we figured we better get on the stick and get out in front of this and come up with a new guidance document for improving the processes for creating PCRs, and also for helping people who are evaluating PCRs determine whether the PCR will be good enough to produce EPDs with the results that they're looking for. So here's where we are in the project. Oh, and by the way, this presentation I'm showing you is part of a presentation we did at the ACLCA National Conference at the end of September to an open session there. And so, we talked about was just what I've told you, how we organized the group and what are the challenges in the marketplace today. And so what are we doing about it? So here's the big idea. We're updating the existing PCR guidance to ensure harmonization, standardization, consistency, and reliability of PCRs. So here's what the draft structure looks like. We're taking a user-centered approach because there's actually a lot of people who participate in creating a PCR. And Stacy, what you're doing with the document that you're producing for each category, it's a little bit like the PCR creation process. You're almost creating like a Part B or an addendum to a PCR. We'll have to think about that more. But in this core guidance document, it's literally the instructions for what each participant in the process should be doing at each step in the process. So the guidance document is really not going to be a long, pagey document. It's really written as a checklist. So there will be an introduction about how the document was created and how it should be used. Then there will be a brief description of each of the participating roles, what and who is a program operator, what and who is the PCR committee, who should be on it, and what and who is a part of a PCR review panel. And then there's literally a checklist with step-by-step instructions for what each participant should be doing in each step of the way. So the core guidance describes the PCR creation process, but then there will be a library of addenda where methodologies for how different calculations or different modeling techniques or allocations that are currently in discussion today or don't have clear guidance about how to do it, or there's nothing been published anyplace else. Now within the PCR committee will be new working groups to create the addenda to develop guidance for how to do each of these things. So this is an introductory list as new issues come up that need standardization and guidance. The idea is that that'll be taken on and drafted. And so number 7, so these are not in any order of importance. They're not even alphabetical. It's just a mixed list. But the last one, the renewable energy accounting, that guidance is actually well along the way and is very likely to be ready in Q1. And what that guidance will do is provide information to manufacturers about how to account for renewable energy credits or purchase plans and how it can factor into the reporting of their emissions. Because today in LCAs, the energy calculations get done only on the energy used or purchased at the particular plant. So this is really an important topic, and it's a way that manufacturers are reducing their carbon footprint. And anyway, you can see what's up. And so one of the things on the list is yes, sorting out the EPD comparability and digital EPDs. And so because Building Transparency has really created this fantastic and increasingly easy to use way of publishing EPDs digitally in the first place. One of the addenda will be about digital EPDs using the EPD tool. And so you all already saw Stacy show an example of a digitized EPD based on OpenEPD. The spreadsheet that she gave you a quick glance at identified all of the fields that the EC3 tool likes to have in a digital EPD, again, based on their evaluation of all the EPDs that they had scanned and machine read and hand entered. So, not all PCRs in the EPD requirements section call for all of those fields today. However, if a manufacturer is looking to have their EPDs do well and really represent fairly their product in the EC3 tool, then it's going to be a good idea to make sure that the data is in the LCA and then in the content that is pulled together for the EPD. And as we go forward and more PCRs get created to be better and forward-looking, there may be even more types of content or fields or types of content that we specified in the PCR and then will be made an EPD requirement, and those will also then get rolled into the OpenEPD framework. So last, we're just going to talk about the transparency catalog and how we use the data from the EC3 tool. For those of you who have seen the transparency catalog, you know that we're all about making the product transparency disclosure information more understandable and meaningful, and simplifying it without dumbing it down, frankly. And then I'll show you quickly our own EPD that I mentioned earlier, our transparency report. ISO 14025 says that program operators can call their Type 3 environmental declarations anything they want. So EPD is actually a colloquialism. The technical term is Type 3 environmental declaration. So we decided to call ours transparency reports because they have more than just what has been traditionally required in EPDs, just more than technical data. What we want to do is allow manufacturers to put everything a user would need to know about making a decision about their product all in one place, and also be able to talk about what are they actually doing to improve the environmental performance and material health of their products. So to give the data context, people don't make decisions about doing business with brands on data alone. I mean, that's all about what they believe about the brand. So we really focus on brands, and we focus on helping brands tell their stories and then to make their environmental and material health data more understandable, meaningful, and accessible. So what we've done, we started working with Stacy and her team when they were really even in alpha, so a couple of years ago, and we worked to take that pretty extensive and innovative but very technical methodology for establishing those industry ranges. We wanted to make it simple to, literally in a glance, let people who are looking initially to make lower embodied carbon material selections just be able to, in a glance, see what those are without even having to run, set up and run comparisons. And so we also worked a pretty long time to take a lengthy methodology document and turn it into a tooltip. So you'll see this actually shows up in the transparency catalog interface. And quickly, what the tooltip explains is how the methodology, the EC3 tool methodology works, which is to say that they take the A1 through A3 results from all of the EPDs in a particular category and, effectively add them up, including uncertainty that they've calculated. That's all included in this range. And then they're, again, comparing the reported embodied carbon result from the EPD, that's this black line, with the uncertainty added to it, which then gets compared to the industry range. So in a glance, what we're telling people is, along that range, how does their product, as reported by the EPD, comparing to the industry range? So the lower percentile is better, the higher percentile is less good. But I also want to bring attention, we felt it was really important to remind people that the results are not precise and they are directionally correct, because the results, as reported in the EPD, may not always be reflected exactly in the EC3 tool based on the way the EPD is actually put together. So anyway, you can see that that quintile represents the comparison here. When you're looking at products in the transparency catalog, you can click right into the EPD. You can click right into the digital EPD. That's what that link goes to, and look at the digital EPD. And then you can even start a project modeling, comparing. And again, it's a visual indicator, just like the red list free indicator is, to help people kind of hone in on attributes of environmental and material attributes of products that are important to them. You may have noticed, or maybe not, that all of the EPDs in the transparency catalog link to the manufacturer's listing. All the EPDs in the EC3 tool link to the manufacturer's listing in the transparency catalog to effectively connect the last mile. That's where, if a user wants to get in touch with the manufacturer, they can do that. They can find out more product information. They can find out other types of disclosures that the manufacturer has, and all of the other affordances that the transparency catalog offers. We also have a pretty extensive analytics dashboard that is available to all the manufacturers who have their products in the transparency catalog, where they can see not only the traction to their brand and their products and their disclosures. We make all of the data for all of the manufacturers available to everyone. Again, because we want the efforts of people investing in product transparency and product improvement to be shared. And every year, manufacturers who are responsible for these initiatives have to make a budget. They have to go get the money to do it. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. But by having access to what's happening in the industry, what are their competitors doing? Are they getting a lot of traction? What are industry leaders in other categories doing? They're able to make the business case for doing more. So that's pretty interesting to us. It's also very interesting to the folks who have their products in the catalog. And then just a little bit about our transparency reports. Again, we call them that because we can. We created an integrated marketing tool that integrates product transparency with product marketing. We've built a publishing platform to do that. It is a template, so things are standardized. People can find all the same information in the same place in every transparency report, but each one can be customized to feel and look like the brand it's from. And most importantly, it gives the manufacturer the ability to contextualize the data, tell their story in a meaningful way. It's their story specifically. And it's a great training tool as well as a great sales tool for their customer-facing people who need to become as fluent in explaining the manufacturer's product transparency investments and initiatives, because it is a performance criteria, just like functional performance, cost, aesthetics. They need to be able to talk as eloquently about those things that they've had to use to sell, for year in and year out. These are two new attributes that people use to make decisions about products. And this is the kind of thing where stories matter. The analytics show us that manufacturers who have transparency reports, these pages are all viewed at least 10 times more than other EPDs in that category. People really do read this content, and it really does move the needle. It's easy for us to make a transparency report plant specific. It's a digital tool. In our long view, author once, publish everywhere. So our long view is we build a transparency report, push a button, and that will automatically publish an open EPD into the open EPD tool. Today, when we create an EPD or a transparency report for a manufacturer, we have already, ever since they launched, go in and add the data manually and build a digital EPD. So that's just part of our deliverable. It has been since the transparency catalog and the EC3 tool joined up together and EC3 went live. So that's our story for today. We hope you learned some new stuff, and here's our calls to action. Sign up for accounts, EC3. Transparency report is free. There's no login, so you don't have to sign up for an account, just use it. If anybody can get a demo, we do lots of demos for AEC firms, lots of demos for manufacturers, and think about how you're making your EPDs going forward. And you can talk to us about that too. Stacy, any wrap up?
Nope, that was great, Terry. Just thanks for the time, everyone.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.